Welcome back, y'all. This is the Bluechip Breakdown, and I'm your host, Bull. Happy Friday to everybody. In today's video, I'll be giving y'all my final thoughts on our Tennessee Volunteers versus Kent State. Also, this is going to be our first weekend having some visitors, so that's big. We'll talk about who those visitors will be. Also, update you on our big board for the 2025 class. And I want to take a look at all the SEC games coming up tomorrow, just a little bit, very, very briefly. Of course, we will talk a little bit more in depth about the Oklahoma game. And tonight, we are planning on streaming a very big high school football game. We hope that everyone will join us. Stay tuned to the channel for all that information. It will be coming out here very, very shortly. But as always, y'all, thank you so much for all of the support. Y'all are awesome. We love y'all. Please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. All right, so first I'm gonna give y'all my final thoughts on the Kent State game coming up tomorrow. Number one, I don't like that the game is so late just because this is a team that we are so much better than. I feel like these games should be earlier in the day. Our whole team's gonna have to sit inside of a hotel room trying to stay focused on a team that they know that they're about to go blow out. So I don't like that. I think that the league needs to do something to change that. But outside of that, like I've said all week, biggest thing is just going to be to stay healthy, to execute, to get those young guys in the game, build that depth up for the rest of this year, and also moving forward and, looking forward to next season. Those are going to be my, biggest things that I'm focusing on in this game. But also, it sounds like some of our offensive linemen could sit this one out. I think that the whole team is going to be on some sort of a pitch count. Exactly what that is, I couldn't tell you. Probably going to be very similar to what it looked like versus UT Chattanooga. But I think that as long as Nico's in the game, our starting five needs to have their butts in the game. Y'all have no business. Y'all have no right to go sit out and put our starting quarterback in jeopardy, by taking plays off and stuff like that. I disagree with that. I think that if they're not injured, they need to go as long as Nico's out there. Like, why risk that? And it's not to say that Kent State has this great pass rush, because, they definitely don't. I think that we could definitely plug in a few spots with some backup players and probably be just fine. But, look, man, y'all get y'all's butts in there. Y'all work through whatever little soreness that you have. It probably won't be that long. I think the starters will only go for the first half. In a perfect world inside of my mind, only for the first quarter. And I think that maybe that's what the staff should do. Say, hey, listen, guys, we need for y'all to come out there, okay, play for the whole first quarter and make sure that everyone's okay, and then get out of the game. And then we can all rest, we can all chill and cheer our teammates on. That's the way that I feel like things should go. And hopefully it can go that way. But, regardless of all of that, I think that we will use our wide receivers a lot more, like we've talked about. I would expect a lot more 11 personnel. Probably will mix in some 12 as well. But I think that guys like Squirrel White, Brew, and Chris Brazzell should get some touchdowns in this game. Obviously, anything that we put on film at this point, knowing that we have Oklahoma coming up next weekend, is going to be very, very intentional. Also, if you talk about guys like D. Samp, why put him out there? If he goes, maybe for one series, that should be it. Like, don't put him out there for too long either. Other guys need work worse, right? Guys like Bishop, guys like Cam Seldon especially, who only has 7 carries this whole season. He should be getting the bulk of the carries in this game because we're definitely going to need him moving forward. And we got to know that he can carry that load. He has to get himself into game shape, all that good stuff. But then Peyton Lewis, want to see his yards per carry average skyrocket in this game. I would expect for him to break a couple of long ones. And then also Keith, all those guys. We need for them to get in there and show that, hey, we can carry this load, or at least we can help carry this load, and we can be dominant, in this run game and pass protection, all that type of good stuff. Now, this with the tight ends, I think that they will get some touches in this game. Again, everything that we put on film will be intentional for Oklahoma. So expect for them to kind of take a step back just as far as the stats and all that type of stuff goes in this one. But I would love to see them get at least one touchdown from that entire room. That would be huge, because if we can, just looking way for like towards the end of the season, also kind of like looking at playoffs, things like that, the more ways that you can show that you've scored, especially on a game-by-game basis, the more that these DCs are going to have to game plan for, and that's going to make us a lot more explosive, a lot more dangerous when it counts the most. So, yeah, let's still mix some things up. You know what I mean? Like, let's put a few things out there on film and let folks know we've got plenty of weapons. So you just have to pick your poison. How do you want to lose these games? I think that that's the mindset that we need to have moving forward. And then just talking about defense, let's start up front. We know that UT Chattanooga in week 1 did a lot of cut blocking, and that cut blocking can be dangerous. But, I have seen Oklahoma do it on film. I haven't seen Kent State do it. They might do it in this game. Hopefully they don't, knock on wood. But if they do, I would love for us to put on film that we've learned how to kind of get off of that, how to beat those cut blocks, because we didn't do a great job of that in week 1. And we need to try to, discourage teams as much as possible from doing that because, again, knock on wood, it can be very, very dangerous. But outside of that, I think that James Pierce will probably get home in this game. Not going to get very many reps, but there's one play that stands out to me versus NC State where James Pierce comes on a stunt, which just means that it can mean a lot of different things. But for James Pierce, he starts on the outside and came back to the inside on a stunt, and he actually almost took the handoff from the quarterback. So if the quarterback was dropping back to pass, that more than likely would have been a sack. So I think that he will get home. I know that there has been a little bit of concern that he has not been getting any sacks, but it's just because teams are game planning for him. They're trying to scheme, something around him so that he doesn't just wreck every single game. But it's coming up now, y'all, where teams are going to have to start game planning for some of our other players because they're also wreaking havoc. So once that happens, once we get more into the league play where teams are going to have to start to throw the ball down the field, James Pierce will eat. Trust when I tell you that's coming. He is a dude. He's still very, very twitchy, very explosive. So I would expect for us to maybe run some stunts early on with him just to try to get him some stats. Now, the players and the coaches will say, we don't care about those stats, those numbers, but I can promise you that the players do to some degree, especially if you were as high profile coming into a season as James Pierce was. So expect for him to get some touches. I think that would be important for him, just as far as continuing to have that confidence that we already know he's a confident guy, but it doesn't hurt for you to see those numbers for you to get home sometimes. I think that can help you, a lot moving forward. It's also good to put that type of stuff on film. Now, just as far as the rest of that D-line, I want to see all the younger guys coming in, getting some good burn. We'll talk about Caleb Herring. He needs to definitely look better than I feel like he has so far. I want to see dominance from him. Jordan Ross, I want to see him showing, hey, I can be one of those dudes too. I think that Tyree West has looked good. Tyree Weathersby hasn't played nearly as much, in my opinion, as he should, but whenever he's been in, he's looked good. I expect with him getting more reps in this game to get home, to make some big plays, for us to be talking about him coming up on Sunday. Outside of that, man, all the guys on the inside too, Jackson Moore, Nathan Robinson, whoever gets in, I just want to see continued growth and dominance at this point in the season. Linebackers, I want to see Edwin Spillman going, okay? I think this will be his first time getting out on the field. He needs to have a really big game. I don't know what's going on with Jordan Burns. I would love to see him, get some playing time because he could be, another one of those guys that we're going to need at some point this season. And who else do we got back there? Obviously, man, Jalen Smith, Caleb Perry is going to be back. Those two guys, want to see them just continuing to grow. And all of our regular guys, too, all the starters, they probably won't get very many reps, but I would expect for them to be very, very dominant. I want to see some turnovers from that group, no question. And just talking about the secondary, Boo Carter needs to, he needs to continue to grow. And then all the other younger guys, whether they're playing at safety or a corner, I want to see them continue to make those strides. Look good in your coverage down the field. Continue to play with that proper leverage. Just keep on having fun, I would say, y'all, as an entire team. And, definitely want to see our second string quarterbacks going out there playing with a whole lot of command and confidence within our offensive scheme. All of that good stuff. So it should be a great day. But again, y'all, it's just all about staying healthy and executing at a really, really high level. All right, now let's talk about some other games around the SEC, starting off with Alabama versus Wisconsin. That game will start at noon. It's going to be in Wisconsin. Alabama is currently favored by 16 points, and the over-under is 50.5. This is a game that a lot of folks are saying, well, hey, it could be kind of close because, number one, Alabama didn't look great versus South Florida last weekend, but they had two of their starting tackles not playing up until that fourth quarter, which is when they really took over. And I think that does kind of speak volumes about how much of a drop-off there is on their offensive line, especially with the tackles for that game to be that close versus South Florida. But I think that they're still a really good football team. They've got dudes everywhere. I think that they've got a good head coach. Of course, I'm going for Wisconsin in this game. And I am a little bit encouraged that they're passing the ball more this season than they have, in previous years, where whenever we think about Wisconsin, we think about them running the ball 45 times plus every single game. That number's come down some. Okay, it's about, 35 runs per game, or maybe a little bit more than that. Maybe it's about 38 runs per game. Whatever it is, it's like 38 runs per game to about 35 passes per game. So, hey, look, I mean, there's several other teams in the Big Ten as well that are starting to throw the ball a little bit more. So look at them starting to play some modern football. You have to love that. I do think that Alabama will win this game, but it could end up being a little bit closer than the 16 points that the experts think Alabama will win by. Of course, I will be watching that one very close because we have Alabama coming up here in about a month from now, okay? A little bit over a month from now. The next game is also going to be at noon, and this is going to be LSU versus South Carolina. The game will be in Columbia. LSU's favored by 6.5 in this game. The over-under is 48.5. This is a game that historically, y'all, LSU would come out and absolutely destroy South Carolina. South Carolina is not a good team. Kentucky just sucks that bad. So the simple fact that people are saying that LSU is only going to beat them, by about a touchdown, at this point, it's got to be a little bit mind-boggling to you. And I understand why. I've been telling y'all for the longest time. Brian Kelly has been a head coach in the FBS with a ton of talent for a long time, right? Like for over, I would say like a decade. It's maybe like a decade and a half. It's pretty close to that. And he has 0 championships to show for that. I just don't think that he's a very good coach. He's got to be one of the longest tenured head coaches in all of FBS. Either way, y'all, this one is probably going to be closer than it should be. I'm hoping the LSU goes out there and blows, Junior Beamer ball out the water. That would be perfect for me. But I just don't see it just because I don't think that Brian Kelly knows what to do with talent. There is plenty of it there. So I wouldn't be surprised if LSU does come out and just kill South Carolina. I mean, they have them outmatched physically. But, man, sometimes this comes down to the coaching, which is funny to say because I don't think the Shane Beamer is that good of a coach either. I just think that I don't know what the heck's going on. I think that Kentucky just sucked that bad. So now we have another one right here at 12:45. This is another big one. I'm definitely going to be watching this one very, very closely. It's Boston College versus Mizzou, and that dork on up there. This game is going to be in Columbia, Missouri, and Mizzou is actually favored by 15.5 points. And the over-under is 53.5. Now, I don't know what would make me happier this weekend than seeing Dorkowitz and his whole team getting blown out at home by a Boston College team that actually likes to run smash mouth football. I like what they're doing from a scheme perspective, but I mean, this as far as the talent level, it's nowhere near it. I think that Boston College can keep this game kind of close. We'll see. Now, I'm not going to lie to y'all. Mizzou does have, or at least they look good. They haven't played anybody at all this whole season, but they do look the part so far. We will see what happens. I don't think they've given up maybe any points this whole year. Don't quote me on that. I think that they've only given up, I don't know if they've given up anything at all, honestly. So we'll see. I think the BC will score on them. That would be great, right? Just because people are saying, oh, man, Mizzou's got this crazy good defense. No. They just haven't played up against any offense. So we'll see what happens in this one. But I think that, Mizzou will probably end up winning. I'm not going to do a score prediction right now, y'all, just because I'm planning on doing that tomorrow on the live stream with P and Timmy G. So on to the next game at 3:30. Now, this is a big one. This is Tulane versus Oklahoma. The game will be in Norman, and Oklahoma is actually favored by 13 points. The over-under is only 46.5. I can tell you this just from kind of paying attention to a lot of the, insider stuff with Oklahoma. Their fans, their insiders are very discouraged about the way that their offense has been looking. And of course, Oklahoma usually has very explosive offenses. I'd say maybe over the past 20 years or so, their offenses have always been good. Well, maybe not here recently as good, but that's what you think of if you think of Oklahoma, is one of those offenses that puts up a ton of points and they can win in shootouts. The offense hasn't looked like that so far this season. And a big part of the reason for that, like we've talked about, is with the offensive line. It's patchwork. Will they start to gel this weekend? Hopefully they don't get to gel too much. I would say this, though. The biggest thing that I'm going to be watching out for is, of course, number one, how do they look up front with the offensive line? But how does Jackson Arnold respond? There's been so much outside noise with this team about, man, that offense just sucks and blah, blah, blah. And, hey, we need to do this. We need to do that. There's been a ton of talk about, hey, they need to try to establish their running game, maybe get outside of running those inside zones, which is more downhill running, and starting to try to do some more 12 personnel, even 13 personnel, and running that gap scheme that we've talked about with Tennessee, that Tennessee's looked good doing. I'll also say this. A lot of the Oklahoma folks have been pointing to Tennessee's offense and saying, hey, how come our offense can't look like this? Either way, I want to see how does Jackson Arnold respond, because if he does, start to play with some confidence, this is still a very scary team. They still have really good talent everywhere. And I think that he is that key that can unlock everything, but it's tough to do when you don't have confidence in your offensive line. So we'll be watching that one very closely. I'll also tell y'all this. Tulane ain't a slouch team. They've got a very good quarterback too. This Mensah kid, man, he's a baller. I think that he's probably going to end up being one of the, guys in the transfer portal after this season that everyone's going to be in on. I think that he can make some things happen. But the thing about Tulane's offensive line is they're small, right? They're very small. I think that they're going to be outmatched physically, but they're nasty, okay? They play through the echo of the whistle. So we'll see how things look from that perspective versus a very good front that Oklahoma has. I think that they've got some dudes, especially on the inside. We will see how that whole game plays out. I also really like Oklahoma's linebackers, man. You know, they've got a few that are good. I think one of them didn't play last weekend. We'll see if he comes back for this one. I want to say he's number 11. He played versus Temple. He looks good. Him and number 28, I think Stutzman. Those guys can go. I've also talked a lot about Oklahoma's secondary, especially those safeties. They do have a tendency, as far as I've seen on film, to kind of get confused in coverages some. I think that Tulane might be able to take advantage of that in this game. But biggest thing, y'all, is I think that Oklahoma will win this game, but it's probably going to be a little bit of a struggle. And we have to see, will Oklahoma kind of start to gel this weekend and have some confidence heading into next weekend's game. I still think that they are dangerous, but we will cover them a lot more, obviously, probably starting on Sunday. You know, we'll probably start to have a little bit more in-depth breakdowns on them. Now, let's move on up to the next one at 3:30. We have Texas A&M versus Florida. This is another big game. I'm going to be watching this one, maybe not as much tomorrow. You know, I'll probably flip back and forth between this one and Oklahoma, but I will definitely be watching this one pretty closely. The biggest reason for that, number one, let me just break down everything. So Texas A&M is favored by 3 points, and the over-under is 47.5. So the biggest reason that I will be watching this one closely is because whenever I watch Florida on film, I see a team with some dudes. I see a team with plenty of talent. I think that they're a lot more dangerous than anyone realizes. We are looking at that one and saying, oh, we're going to blow them out in Neyland, we should have a whole lot of fun with that one. But I would say not necessarily not so fast. I would just say, let's see what happens, because now if DJ Lagway is the starting quarterback, if they start to get some confidence, if they start to really buy in, because if you watch them on film, I see a whole lot of people that could have made plays that are literally walking. It's like they've just packed it in. If they found some confidence in this game with DJ Lagway, then they could be a team that, you know, could definitely be dangerous. I'm not saying that they're going to be a playoff team, but I think that they could be in any game that they play this entire season with probably the hardest schedule in all of college football. I just think that they have that many pieces. And I think that their scheme could be that, that good, especially having a guy like Lagway running that show. So I'm going to be watching this one very, very closely. But hopefully, man, Texas A&M comes out, runs the ball down their throat, because what I have seen is if you play physical versus Florida early on and you're smashing them in the mouth over and over and over again, that's when I see them quitting. So I need for Texas A&M to win this game, hopefully by more than 3 points, okay, in the swamp. That would be really big, just to kind of get their train off the tracks for those Gators and just get that whole thing just absolutely done. That would be big for our Volunteers, because, man, I'm going to continue to say this until, I see them completely and totally quit. They can be a very, very dangerous football team. Now, the next game is going to be UAB versus Arkansas. Of course, we have Arkansas in about 3 weeks from now. That's one that, I'll watch, at some point this week, just to see how Arkansas bounces back from a horrible loss versus Oklahoma State. But we won't talk too much about that one, because they should absolutely dominate UAB. Now, the next one we've got at 6:30, Ole Miss versus Wake Forest, and Ole Miss is favored by 21.5. The game is actually going to be in Winston-Salem, and the over-under is 63.5. So this game is going to be interesting, because I think that Ole Miss's offense is for real. They've been very basic putting up these points. Have not seen a whole lot of different necessarily formations and sets. It's been a whole lot of the same stuff. We know that Lane Kiffin can call up. He can kind of scheme things up. I wouldn't necessarily say that he's a great game planner, but he does have a really nice opening script to his games. So my biggest question for Ole Miss is going to be, how does their defense look versus Wake Forest? And I don't think the Wake Forest has this great offense by any means, but the teams that they've played up against so far this season just haven't really had any sort of an offense. And I think that there are some question marks about Ole Miss's defense. They play that 3-3-5, and the way that they play it is very, very soft. I think there's a ton of holes inside of that defense, and that could be the issue for Ole Miss to maybe be a playoff team. I don't know if they're going to be able to just outscore everyone, but it looks like so far for me, they're playing up against some better competition. Ole Miss is going to try to beat you in a shootout. I just thought, I just want to see how their defense looks in this one. So that's going to be my biggest question, but I would definitely expect for Ole Miss to win this game. Now, next at 7 o'clock, we have UTSA versus Texas. That should be an absolute total blowout. No need to talk about that game. And also at 7 o'clock, we have Vandy versus Georgia State. The game is going to be at Georgia State. Vanderbilt's actually favored by 10.5 points. The over-under is 44.5. This game could be pretty close because Georgia State's not a bad team. I want to see, is Vandy's offense for real? They win by 10.5 points. I'll know that their offense is actually legit. And I would say I'm going to be looking at them too. I don't know if they play up against teams like South Carolina or, maybe like Kentucky, but if they play up against those teams, I think that Vandy might actually get them this season, but we should be able to definitely handle them at the end of the year. Now, we've got 7:30 UGA versus Kentucky. Speaking of Kentucky, the game is going to be in Lexington. Georgia, of course, is favored by 22 points, and the over-under is only 44.5. So they're not expecting for Kentucky to score very many, if any, points at all. Now, we do know that Kentucky's starting quarterback, if he's still going to be starting for this game, transferred from Georgia. He's probably going to want to go out there and try to prove a point versus his old team, but Georgia's also he's probably also going to want to prove a point to him. Now, this is a game that a lot of folks will say, well, man, Kentucky's offensive line is absolutely terrible. You're right on that. But Georgia's front seven, or at least their pass rush, is not as dominant as people think. I don't think that their front four is as dominant as people are giving them credit for. They're still living off of that 21 and 22 hype. It's not the same team. So it'll be interesting to see how much pressure can they get on Kentucky's offensive line, on their quarterback in this game. That'll tell me a lot, because if South Carolina was absolutely wreaking havoc and Georgia doesn't, I think that tells you a lot about how Georgia's pass rush actually looks. Now, Kentucky will probably get a few things fixed, but I would really just expect in this game that Georgia should blow out Kentucky. But there's something in me that's saying this game could be a little bit closer than what people think. And, man, look, Kentucky is pretty much, like a knockoff version of UGA and their whole offensive scheme and style and all that type of stuff. But I think that they will find a little bit of success early on in this game. UGA has gotten off to, very slow starts since Mike Bobo took over as the OC down there. So I would say, man, if this game is kind of close heading into halftime, do not be surprised. And maybe Kentucky gets a little bit of confidence. Of course, I'm going for Kentucky in this game, but I just don't think that they have enough depth to be able to compete with Georgia for 60 minutes in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Now, the next game is going to be at 7:30, New Mexico versus Auburn. New Mexico is not a very good team, okay? They are 0-2. Auburn needs to try to bounce back. Now, I don't know what's going on with Hugh Freeze and playing Peyton Thorne at quarterback. Coach, you got to have somebody else. Please put someone else in, because we need for y'all to get ready to be able to beat Georgia, okay? Please find a quarterback at some point. Hopefully they do that in this game. Hugh Freeze ain't about losing. He does not like to lose, but he is, pretty loyal when it comes, especially to his quarterback, so he might just stick with this guy. But, man, if they can change up their quarterbacks and get some success, all of a sudden Auburn could turn into a team that I feel like could challenge some of these big boys, because, man, that scheme that Coach Freeze likes to run is set up to beat those, higher name, higher caliber teams. So we'll see what happens right there. Now let's talk a little bit briefly about the other game at 7:30, Toledo versus Mississippi State. Mississippi State let me down last weekend, I think versus Arizona State. That just did not look good at all. Then Arizona State comes out and barely beats whoever they barely beat. Whatever. I don't remember if that's actually who Mississippi State played up against last weekend, but they did lose. The whole point is, we play them at some point this season. You don't want for them to get too much confidence. So, hopefully they will lose this game. It's one that I will watch at some point this week, probably later on in this week. I'll just kind of browse through just to see how does Mississippi State look. But, they run a very similar offense to what we run. Hopefully, man, they don't get too much going, because maybe it could pose a few threats to us, especially if we're undefeated at that point in the season. Maybe, that could be some sort of a trap game for us. So, we'll be watching that one pretty closely. But Mississippi State's actually favored by 10.5 points. The game's going to be in Starkville, and it's over-under is 57.5. So we'll see what happens there. I don't know if Mississippi State covers. Wouldn't be really surprised either way. Don't know a whole lot about either of those teams, so we will see what happens. Now it's time to update y'all on our big board for the 2025 class as of today's date, Friday the 13th. I just realized that today is Friday the 13th. So you can see that everyone here, it's all possible commits. And I just want to start this one off very briefly, talking about Christian Gass still taking visits. He went down to UGA last weekend. I think they played up against Tennessee Tech, whatever. I think that he's kind of downplaying how big of a deal that actually is, just because some of these players will continue to take those visits. And I think that he is still solid to Tennessee. But if you're really solid, you're not going to go visit anyone else. Okay. Now, it sounds like that was actually his first college football game that he's been to, which is a little bit weird. He is expected to come up for the Florida game and also for the Alabama game. So he will be able to see a very strong contrast in the difference in game day in Athens versus game day in Knoxville. Hopefully that will make him even more solid. And he'll say, man, look, I don't need to take any more visits. And he will completely and totally wrap it up. But UGA will continue to try to flip guys like Christian Gass and, everyone else that we have. We've got a whole lot of really good players committed. So we're going to have to make sure that we are maintaining those players as time goes on. But talking about the list of players that we have right here up under possible commits, starting off with 4-star linebacker Ty Jackson, currently committed to USC. And the reason I still have him up here is because, number one, I think that the staff will continue to talk to him and see if we can't flip him from SC. But also, just to highlight y'all, SC is doing something special. They're doing something different that I have not seen any other program do in the entire country. I'm seeing it firsthand. So for 2026, 27, and 28, they're off to a very solid start, especially here in the metro Atlanta area. We got to keep a very close eye on USC. Now, the next player is going to be 4-star defensive lineman. I think he's going to be a defensive tackle, Andrew Maddox, currently committed to Ole Miss. He is still planning on visiting us either for the Florida or for the Alabama game. So, we definitely need to get in. I mean, I would say if we could add one more linebacker and one more D tackle in this class, that would be ideal. Also, probably want to try to add one more running back, and we've got 3-star USC commit D Moore still on this list. I don't think he set anything up at all, just as far as getting on campus. So if he hasn't changed that by the next time that we update y'all on this big board, I'm going to go ahead and take him off. And, I would say that the staff is probably going to be looking towards maybe trying to find another running back somewhere else if that's really what they want to do. If they're, saying, hey, we really need to add one more running back to this class, I think that might be the route that we are starting to lean towards. Now, the last player that we'll talk about on this list is going to be new, and that's 3-star Joseph Mbachu. And I hope I'm saying his name right, but he is a defensive lineman. I think that he could play almost anywhere on that D-line, about 6'5", 280. Definitely, a tackle body, but he's twitchy enough that I could, envision him playing somewhere on the edge as well. Now, he's very new to playing football, and he does play at Grayson High School. That's going to be close to me. That's kind of like down the street. So I'm going to be watching him closely, see if I can't maybe get some inside intel, but it does sound like he likes Tennessee, currently committed to Florida, and he's got like 15 offers since he did commit to Florida. So with how things are trending for those Gators, man, it's going to kind of be like open season to get guys like this who I think should probably be at the top of our list at this point as far as uncommitted players. We'll see how, this list kind of changes as, of course, the staff will be out on the road this weekend to take in and, kind of look at some more players. This list right here could end up looking a lot different once we update it. Now let's talk about all of our expected visitors for this weekend's game versus Kent State. Number one, up under 2025, all of those players are current commits. David Sanders, Justin Baker, Sidney Walton, Dylan Lewis, Travis Smith, and Ethan Utley are all expected to be in attendance. So if you're going to be on campus at all, look out for these players, okay? And you will be able to tell because they'll probably be with one host or maybe a couple of hosts, and they'll definitely have their name, somewhere on their shirt, some sort of a name tag. So if you don't know their face, just look at their shirt, and if you could maybe call them by name, say something nice to them. That would go a very long way for us to make sure that we can retain the players that we already have coming up, and also maybe to get some more of these players to really start to love Tennessee. I'll tell you this right now, one of the biggest things going for Tennessee is going to be our fan base and the atmosphere on game days. So do your best if you are there to make it as special as you can for all these players. Now, if you look at 2026, Carson Sneed will also be there, and he is a commit from the 2026 class. But several other players y'all can see, it's a ton of front seven. I'll give y'all a second to kind of go through that list. Down at the bottom, all those players are guys that don't necessarily have a star rating with On3 or anything like that, but those are guys that are really good. Our staff does a great job of finding that talent before most other programs or sites, whatever, can get a strong grasp for just how good those players are. So not too worried about that, man. I think that's a very strong list for for the 2026 class to be coming up for a game versus Kent State that should be an absolute and total blowout. Now, let's take a look at even more players that we have expected to be coming up for tomorrow's game. 2027, y'all can see several players. Of course, they don't really have ratings just yet, but I think that all those guys are going to be high profile, Also, we've got a couple of 2028 guys as well. So again, man, I'm very proud of this staff for going out, targeting several players, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more people that end up coming to this game. So like we said, man, if you see any prospects up there, take a look at their shirt, somewhere on their chest. There will be a name tag. Try to call them out by name and just say something really nice to them. I think that's the best way that we could give our all for Tennessee as fans. Listen, y'all, thank you so much for all of the support on this channel. Thank you for sticking all the way to the end. And please make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share with your friends, family, and other volunteer fans. We will hopefully see y'all tonight for the live stream of a very big high school football game at around 7:30, maybe 8 p.m. Thank y'all so much. We'll see y'all in just a minute. Peace.